They're Samoan. That's their names.
What's up, WWE Champions Universe? Welcome to Champions Chat, the fastest growing podcast dedicated to the WWE Champions mobile game and the new bloodline. I'm Tamatanga, Rusty Graves, and with me as always is Tangaloa Lee Brown. What's up, Lee?
Well, technically Tangaloa hasn't debuted yet, so we don't know if we can officially say that I'm that, but hey, I'll take it. I'm excited to see something shaking up in the bloodline storyline after all these decades.
Of blood goes beyond TV appearances, right? Blood is thicker than TV contracts. So
that's right.
Zinga Zanga and Nia Jax and I have to believe Naomi is going to head to the bloodline at some point, right?
Possibly.
Is that Jimmy's wife or Jay's wife?
Jimmy's, yeah.
Yeah. No, maybe Jimmy's out with. And who is the new tribal chief? Surely
we don't know yet.
It's just Solo, right? Calling the shots.
Maybe.
Calling himself that.
What if it is Tangaloa? What if that's how he shows up and we see, or maybe there's another surprise. Maybe it's
Bro,
Rikishi.
Please let it be Nia Jax. Please let the new tribal chief be Nia Jax.
Wow.
The chieftess, the high chieftess, face breaker, botchamaniac queen of the bloodline, Nia Jax. Wouldn't that be incredible?
Maybe.
My son got a the undisputed Universal Championship replica belt. I say replica toy. Yeah. The toy version that's like $10 at Walmart or whatever, $20. So we got him that in his Easter basket this year. And recently my wife was cleaning the house and putting away his toys, and she picked up the belt and put it on her shoulder to tease him, right? And she's like, I'm the champion now. My son is 7. He said, Mom, you look like Nia Jax.
Wow.
She goes, is she a wrestler? He's like, oh yeah, she's a big one.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And I'm in the other room, like trying not, I'm like biting my lip. I'm laughing so hard. And I'm like, don't tell her. Don't tell her what he just said. Don't interpret.
Don't give translation to that transgression.
Well, today's show notes, Lee, we are talking about faction strategy. We're talking about what are the roles of a faction? What is a good war score for faction feud? How do I know I'm in the right faction? And how do we approach this new faction boss battle scoring strategically as a faction? Has to be a lot to talk about. And we're going to talk about some WWE TV at the end. I can't wait to hear your take on a certain superstar that made his re-debut this week on WWE TV. All right, you ready to dive into it?
I'm ready.
Lee, I, for years, have seen these little taglines inside the game where some people are leaders, some people is co-leader. I can't remember if that's, okay, yeah. So leader, co-leader, officer, enforcer, and recruit. Is that the titles? Did I miss any? Are there others? Is there sergeant?
That's all I can think of.
Commander, Sergeant Pepper, anything like that? Do those
Purple
mean
Cajun.
anything? Do those mean anything? And let me ask this supplemental question. A lot of those same titles are also used in a faction Discord server. And so does the authority you have in the faction, in the game, is that commensurate to what is also expected of you in your faction on Discord? Because as we all know, the majority of faction life happens on faction chat. You're strategizing, you're chatting, you're talking, you're making jokes, you're sending memes, you're telling people that your wife is Nia Jax, and all that happens on Discord. So Lee, what in the world are faction roles? And what if I don't have a role? Should I aspire to have one? What do they mean? What do they do? And are they just a silly thing that was in the game or that was stolen from another game? I'm going to kick it over to you now because all I've got is questions.
Well, that was a lot of them. So I would say the basis of it goes to it depends. It depends on your faction, right? We've been in a faction or two, and in one faction, the roles were pretty much like there was the officers and there was everybody else, and that was pretty much it, right? And then where we are now, there is that kind of, we'll call it a striation of leadership. Oh, that's a word. And there
Is that a real word?
do seem to be roles within there. So your recruit, I mean, that's the everybody else category. Probably
Okay.
70 to 80 people in your faction are going to just be recruits. So likelihood is that 80% chance you are a recruit in your faction. If you're not, then we need to talk about some other things. But recruits are basically, the ones who are to kind of fulfill the faction requirements together.
Right.
We're playing together. We're seeing what we can do together. We're kind of being there. I don't want to call us pawns in chess because that sounds a little derivative or whatever, but
Right.
functionally, I mean, it's the rank and file,
Or the
right?
foot soldiers, maybe
Yeah,
the front line, right? The
right,
ones that are being sent into battle, whether it be whatever feud, boss battle, but that includes everyone. So like
right.
a leader is still a foot soldier. He's still on the
Yeah,
ground doing the boss battle. I would think.
right,
I don't know of any faction whose officers or leaders would be allowed to just get zeros and still
right,
retain. That would be a faction to leave very quickly. We're going to get to
right.
that question. How do I know if I'm in the right faction? If your
There
leader
you go.
is getting zeros while you grind to get the rewards, leave that faction.
You're in trouble. Yeah, yeah, right. Well, then you've got your enforcer, and since we've already brought up the bloodline, I think the parallel is just perfect to Solo Sikoa, because the role that you've seen him have on WWE TV as the enforcer, like he's not the one who's in charge, he's
Right?
executing the will of the leaders, but when somebody gets out of line, right,
They get
like
a
Simone
thumb to
Spike to the
the
throat.
throat or
That's right.
15 thumbs to the throat if your name's Jimmy Uso.
There you
Oof,
go.
that was brutal, bro. Did you watch that? That was
I did.
brutal.
I
They beat
did.
him. Jim Ross used to say he beat him like a government mule.
Government mule. He whipped him like a scalded dog.
Oh my
Yep.
gosh. Um,
Yep.
so 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 enforcer is a role within the game, right?
Right.
Do you have abilities within the game? Does that mean you can kick someone out of the faction if you're an enforcer?
I don't know because again, the faction I was in before, I went from recruit to one of the leaders, and then here, I kind of came in and started out on that leadership level. So I've skipped enforcer each time. So I don't know
Oh, okay.
exactly, but I know like in Discord, especially, the enforcers are the ones who are kind of that frontline shield to the leaders, like, hey, this is what's going on. There's some things happening. You should be aware of this, but also just keeping that, not being falsely positive. That's never the role. It's never
Right.
to be a suck up or to be like, oh, everything's sunshine and roses, guys. Just
Team
pretend.
Scopely for life.
Woo! Yeah, yeah.
Definitely not. I don't know. Even the content creators are not,
Oh,
to
if
that
only you knew.
level, of blind followership, right?
Right.
So, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. But the enforcer does say, I would say in game, I have no clue, but
Kind of
are
looks
we
like I have
dancing?
horns. These stupid guitar hooks behind me. Sorry,
Oh, I thought you were
I was just
dancing.
looking like, what are these, and how do I? Yeah, they look like my horns, like my moose horns, a baby moose.
Moose
Sorry.
and squirrel. Yeah, but in chat in Discord, I think the enforcer has an important role because obviously when things go wrong, like an enforcer and the leaders and officers as you go up, the role is to kind of give perspective and context. Like if it sucks, call it out and say, guys, we're going to get through this. It sucks. But if it is something like there's oftentimes, you'll see in a chat where day one, everybody is freaking out or something's going on. And oftentimes it's like, hey, just chill, wait till the end of this contest, it'll be fine. And it usually is. Usually, even if something goes catastrophically weird, Scopely sends a make good or adjusts points or gives another tour.
Yeah.
But that day one, when everybody's like first hitting that, I have a friend who's a key leader, and what he says, and this applies to everybody from enforcer on up, but what he says is the role of the leader is to be a non-anxious presence in every anxious situation. And I'm
Whoa.
like, oh,
That's
okay.
super good. Will you text me that to remind me of that later? That's really good. A non-anxious presence in
In
every
every
anxious,
anxious situation.
and that kind of falls into a lot of life. Like
Yeah.
life is anxiety ridden. I don't know that I've ever heard that quote before. So touche, touche. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's Maxwell or Simon Sinek or whoever, but that's really good.
Right.
That's really good stuff.
Yeah. Yep, it is. Well, it's not, I don't know. There's Mark Sayers has a book,
Oh
A
yeah.
Non-Anxious Presence on that. But
Oh,
yeah, anyways.
so I wonder, when I hear the word enforcer, I think they are there to enforce something, right?
Right.
Does this mean maybe the rules of the faction? Like, let's say someone is making sexist jokes or
Yeah.
jokes that are inappropriate, sending memes that are vulgar, offensive, um, let's God forbid, right? A racist situation should arise, a racist joke. I would think if I have someone in my faction called an enforcer, they would be the one probably not to send that joke, but also to
Right.
say, or like to have the ability to delete it from Discord and then to
Right.
probably DM the person and say, we don't do that here. That ain't funny.
Yeah.
Not cool, bro.
It's
Is
like,
that,
hey, love you, don't love this. You
yeah,
know?
yeah. And like that's inevitably humor always pushes the boundary of appropriateness. The things that are often the funniest are the most inappropriate.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the things that get laughed about or teased about are often our differences, be it
Right.
weight, orientation, gender, race, socioeconomic status. Any of these things are oftentimes the richest content for a stand-up comedian, but
Right.
also the source of a very quick offense or a quick wound or a deep wound by someone in your faction,
Yeah.
right? And so I don't know. I think when I think enforcers, I think about basically the police. They are law enforcement. They point to the law.
Yeah.
They really can't. It's kind of an illusion that they can enforce the law. You really
Right.
can't. You can't force someone to do what's right.
Right.
However, you can highlight when they have broken the
Right.
rules, and you
Right.
can they can be subject to consequences for
Yep.
breaking the rule. Like I would think a racist or homophobic type joke would probably get you kicked out of most factions pretty quick.
Yeah.
um which I know, and this is, we're such a PG kind of podcast, we're such a
Mm.
family friendly deal, um that I would think if you wouldn't hear Lee or I say it on Champions Chat, it's probably inappropriate. And I would say this, if you could only hear me saying it and not Lee, it could also probably be inappropriate. So you'd be like,
What? No.
but there are some things I joke about and some things I do not
Right.
ever joke about, right? Um,
Yeah.
for some reason,
Well,
the joking thing seems to come up a lot in faction chat because we want to laugh, we want to have fun.
yeah.
How do we have fun? We make jokes, right? We joke
Yeah.
around.
Well, and I think too, you said, well, I've got two thoughts on that. But one, you said, you get kicked out quick. And I guess if intent is there, then yeah. If it's something like, I think the role of the enforcer to be like, hey, you posted this joke. I don't think you realize that actually kind of hurt some people. Like,
Oh
would you
yeah,
mind taking that back and maybe apologizing? And if the
right.
person's like, ha, screw you, then okay, now then the enforcer, then it's yeah with the thumb, right? But
Our and I would say this. I don't know about every faction out there. Our faction has a diverse composition of male and female
mm,
and over 18 and under 18 and um
and other
orientation.
things.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
just say orientation. That
there you
covers a
go.
lot.
Yeah,
Political affiliation.
right.
Um all of it. Racial, even country humor, right? We're in the US. Not everyone in our faction is in the US. And so and when I take some shots at French Canada because my ancestry, there's a long story there, right? But I'm Cajun Creole. They were driven out of French Canada. They were exiled and they settled
Hmm.
in Louisiana. So what might be a joke for me, right? Um, a lot of our higher ups at Scopely speak French. And so it is a fine line of what I joke about and what I don't. What might seem like they don't know the context. They don't know why I'm
Right.
taking that poke, right? And unless we are very close, they're probably going to go, "What the heck, bro? Why are you constantly bashing my identity, who I am, what I stand for, what I
Right.
do, my language, the very core of who I am? You're taking shots at and doing bad impressions of on your show, right?" Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm preaching to me today, not to you. I'm not out there preaching to you guys. This is for me as a reminder.
I
And so,
just get the lame jokes. That's
yeah.
all.
And as we talk about faction life, many factions have imploded because the enforcers let it slide
Yeah.
too far and people got hurt, offended, washed their hands of the faction. The faction got a bad reputation because of it, right?
Yep.
Don't want to go there. They're toxic, right?
Yep.
That's how many times have you heard that about, a particular leader or a particular faction or particular, and that, I mean, over the 6+ years of the game's
Right.
existence, 7-year anniversary.
Seven
Yeah,
plus.
it's like
Yeah.
how many times have you heard like, stay away from those guys,
Right.
So Lee, what about
Yeah.
officer? So we talked about recruit. Do you have any more about enforcer?
Well, yeah, this will segue us up into that. So once you get to the role of enforcer, what you're really starting to talk about is who are the shapers of the culture, who are the guardians of the culture.
Oh,
And
that's a great way to
there's
put
a
it.
lot of great leadership writings. William Vanderbloemen has a great book called Culture Wins. And the idea is, if you quote Peter Drucker, he says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture
Mm,
eats vision for breakfast. Culture eats, so like whatever
right.
great vision statement you have on the wall, we want to be the number one producers of widgets. Or one of my favorite vision statements ever was Google's back in the early 2000s. Google's vision statement was don't be evil, because they considered
Wow.
Microsoft to be big evil. That's what they called them, was big evil. So they said, don't be evil. In other words,
We're
we are
quoting
defining
Google.
ourselves
We're
as
not making
not
any definitive
Microsoft.
statements about any
Right.
major corporations that could
This
sue the
this
pants
was
off of
their
us.
wall statements. Yeah. But
Allegedly.
whatever, allegedly.
Allegedly. Put the word alleged over
There you
this
go.
entire
Asterisks.
episode.
So whatever you put on the wall,
Right.
if the culture of that is not, so like if you say, hey, we're the friendliest taco shop in Colorado or whatever,
Right.
but then people walk in and the people are grumps and they're angry, but it says right on the
Ooh.
wall, we're the friendliest taco shop in,
Right.
you're like, the culture doesn't match, and
Mm.
the culture will win every single time. So the enforcers
Gosh, that's
on up to
good.
the officers, the main role is to be a shaper of the culture. And so, like, okay, humor. you need humor. Like we're wired for
Yes.
it, right?
I am a big advocate of humor. Huge
Yeah,
advocate, for the record, right?
right. But you also need to know within the bounds of your faction, and maybe there are some universals, but maybe there are some things that your faction, like if that's the culture you want, your faction might go in on something and you're like, haha, that's who we are. And there are other factions that the culture of it is a little bit different. And you just have to recognize, what is the culture we want? What do we want to see? Which is going to play into when we have the war score conversation. Are you a casual faction? Are you a rewards based faction? Are you a family
Right.
based faction?
Right.
But the officer is just one step beyond the enforcer. The officers actually can remove people from the
Ah,
faction.
okay. So now
They
we're getting
should.
into the in-game authority now, which is
Yeah.
really good.
But
Uh,
the culture comes first. If the
yeah,
officer isn't building a good culture, then ironically, that's what's going to make or break most organizations, most
it's really
businesses,
good.
and most factions.
I love hearing you talk about this stuff, Lee. You are, in my opinion, you are very savvy as far as leadership etiquette and acumen.
Mm.
Like you are a well-studied source for this topic, and I always learn um, when you share about this. So some of this episode is me goading some of your strengths out. But
Well,
here's a nugget of truth that I wrote down as you were
okay.
sharing about this. In my opinion, in my estimation, I wonder if you agree with this or not. As you move up the ranks, um, I'll say in the game, but I bet this applies to most of life. As you
Hmm.
move up the ranks, you have all of the responsibilities of the lower rank plus more.
Yep.
Do you agree? Would you agree with that? You're
I
still,
know.
if you're an officer, you're still responsible for enforcement. Is that true?
Right. Yeah, I would say yes, and I'll add to that. Not only do you have all the responsibilities of that, but the higher you go in a leadership in anything in life in this game, the more you have to give up your rights as well. So like as a
Mm,
recruit, you can be the one who mouths off every once in a while and needs a little correction. If you're doing that as an officer, you are misshaping the culture. So
mm,
therefore, you're misusing your privileges. And as you get to leader, there are things as a leader in my organization, there are things that I have given up the right to do. Like they're within my human rights, so to speak, but I've
right,
given up the right of that because if I do that thing, it causes, issues down the chain. And I've told our leaders many times, if you set a bar here, most people will meet you here, right?
right,
So if you set the bar here, it
right.
goes here it goes here, it goes. So if you're the
Gosh,
one, if
so
you're an
good.
officer, if you're a co-leader, and you are, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, everything, blah, blah, your voice, because of that position, has a lot more weight to it. Like if you
Yeah,
saw Triple H come out on TV and go, oh my gosh, the ratings are falling and everybody wants to leave, this place is falling apart. Like,
which they never did.
oh my
They
gosh, we're
never did
done.
that
Right. No,
during the
no.
pandemic when things
Yeah.
were actually terrible.
Right.
What did they do? They built a battle dome and they made the
Right.
best of it,
Yeah.
and they kept going so that they had enough time to right the ship,
Right.
right? They would not
Right.
be in the era they are in now if they went to chaos and panic then,
Right.
which is
Triple H was the non-anxious presence in every room. And if he were to now, if TV ratings dip suddenly and he comes out, oh my gosh, the ship is sinking. Well, what does that say to the enforcer? What does that say to the recruit? Now all of a sudden they're freaking out even more. Instead of him
right,
being the non-anxious presence, he has amplified anxiety because if I'm a recruit, if I'm one of the entry level players and I'm freaking out, not that you don't have a voice, not that you don't matter. I don't hear that, but from a leadership systems management perspective, when you throw your weight around, you're hitting this. But if let's just say an officer, let's say
right.
if Casey Platinum starts going, oh my gosh, WWE execution is gonna whatever, like his voice is here, the
Yeah,
impact of it is here, right?
yeah.
Because if
I love that
Facebook
you
group
mentioned Casey
reaches,
Platinum on the show. We haven't talked about him. I still
we've
want to
not written
get
mentioned in a
him
while.
on a community spotlight. I still
Yeah.
like, so if anyone out there is a friend of Casey's, tell him he has an open invite for an interview with Champions Chat, and we will either air or transcribe that interview and
Right.
read it on the air.
There you
Because
go.
you don't have the history of champions without Casey Platinum. You
Oh
just don't.
wow. Oh wow.
He's one. Love him or hate him, he's on the Mount Rushmore as far as like personalities within champions.
So you got Gerson, Casey
don't
Platinum.
put them all on the same
Okay,
level now.
sorry.
That's not, you don't need to rate people, rank
Oh,
people, and
okay.
all that.
Sorry,
But like
sorry. Bad
he's
culture move, Lee. I
he's
apologize.
he's he's infamous, right?
Yes.
He's infamous,
Yep. There you
and
go.
period. You can't change that. He
Right.
is. So
Well, and that's the voice of the influencer. That's a term we know nowadays that's really common. Everybody wants to be an influencer, everybody, blah, blah. But like
yeah,
legitimately, like if I am a person who has three friends in this game and I get bent out of shape over a faction boss, the ripple of the water goes here. But Casey Platinum has 11,000 people on his Facebook group for this game. And if he gets blown up,
yeah.
like boom, the impact goes here. So the higher up you
I
get in
haven't
leadership, the less
right.
freedom you have, but not like in a it's binding you sort of way. It's in a self-regulation. Like you have to
Yeah.
understand the role you have.
I'll say this to Casey's credit, and I don't have it. I do have some personal exchange with him. We've DM'd a little bit. We've talked about the game a little bit. Um, for as powerful as his Facebook group is, I have not seen him misuse it.
Hmm.
Now yeah, and I don't know. Maybe he has historically. I don't know. Right? But I would say um he's usually not the voice of poo poo in the game
Right.
on and so yeah, he has a powerful platform that
Right.
for the most part is kind of like an open forum. Some things get deleted, but
Yeah.
he's not the
Very
voice
few.
driving the chaos typically.
Right. And one of the
Um
largest Discord servers for this game, and et cetera, et cetera. So again, that's kind of why I picked that name out of the hat. Is if
because you're a
Casey,
Casey mark. I know
I'm
it.
a mark.
You
Yeah,
watch his
I've had one
matches on
conversation with him,
YouTube.
and
You
right.
the Candy Man, Casey Platinum.
Candy man,
Yeah.
can.
I have actually watched his matches on YouTube. If you've not,
I've not.
they're
No.
super entertaining. So,
Gotcha.
um,
So we're on
anything
officer
else
and
on
leaders now.
officer? Anything else on officer?
No, I mean, I think at officer level, that's where the real like enforcer, you start to be a shaper of the culture, but officer on up, you are a cultural. Vanderbloemen in his book calls them the culture whip, the person who like they are so focused on what the culture needs to be
Yeah.
that is their primary thought. And especially as you go to co-leader and leader, the co-leader is there to support the leader. Typically each faction has one or two who are really calling the shots. So for us, like Toxic Mafia, the big three mafia family, Schmeich is our guy. Like we run we run things through him to say, hey, like we've got this person who wants to come in, or should we kick this person and stuff. And Schmeich makes that call, and that's not like he's not like he's the mafia don, or anything like that, like, oh my child, you must listen to my voice, but like he's setting a good culture. And
Right.
really, again, it comes back to you are the leader of the culture, so therefore you are setting that culture. So you would see in boss battle this week, Schmeich has been in our big three faction chat on Discord, just being like, guys, we are going to get our faction requirements first. Then we're doing solo. Like everybody focus on the faction. We can all do this together. We're going to be, and guess what? We went from being a top 30 faction to we're like number 7 in this event right now. So we're flirting with consistently being a top 10
Booyaka,
faction.
booyaka, 619. Sorry. That's me
Rey
celebrating.
Mysterio.
We have gotten so much better
Yeah.
as a faction. And I would say this, the things that we're talking about are the things that we have practiced in our faction. So this is not
Yep.
conceptual theory. This is not Lee
Not
has read a
Austin
lot
theory.
on leadership, but also he's practiced it with a great number of other enforcers, officers, co-leaders, leaders, and we are not leaders in our
No,
faction. We
an
have
officer.
leadership. We have great leadership,
Yeah.
that we are not it. And so not only am I guess sharing about this from a perspective of someone that has benefited from these roles, but also as someone who is not, I am not the driver. Lee is not the driver, right? So we're not
Mm.
just giving you our opinion
Yeah.
on what on the functionality of these roles and the benefit of having really good culture and strong leaders in your faction. It's like we have benefited from the fruit of it and the rewards from it. And we want that for you. We want
Yeah.
that for your faction, right? We just don't want to get ours. That's why
Right.
we have this show. That's why we do what we do, is because we want to see the community flourish and the
Yeah.
game continue to be fun and to be a great escape from the anxiety of real life, right? Back to you,
That's
Lee.
what I'm here for. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really it. So we always, or often, I should say, in this show and our videos and our Friday night stream and etc., with like, hey, it's an honor to be a part of this community. And really, that's what this is. If you look at the desire of the human needs, one of the top three we have is community.
Oh,
And that's what a lot of people are finding, right?
is
That's what,
kissing one of those needs?
no, no,
Is
but every
I would
kiss begins with K.
hamburgers, kissing, and peace and quiet. I don't know. That's might be my top three.
It's actually security, purpose, and community. But either way,
Red wine.
Oh,
If you want to hear my spiel on the red wine, join us on Friday night on Twitch. And I start at the last 30 minutes of the stream. I start talking about my wind down. I'm going to wind down this weekend, open my bottle of red, and enjoy the rest of the weekend. That's when I know the weekend's really started, when we go off stream and I pop that bottle of red and say,
pop your
hey,
bottles.
hey, mama, hey, Nia Jax, how you doing?
Oh, and it's this is what happens on the stream too. And then people start chatting in and wow,
My wife.
wowzers.
I'm referring to my wife, okay? Just and I don't know if that's actually good or bad to clarify at this point. So
Right.
Lee, take us away. Take us somewhere productive.
Oh, you're good.
Uh,
No, I think that was it. The role of the leader, I think, is fairly clear. They set the culture, they set the expectation. So if the faction is going to be a family first faction, that's the prerogative of the leadership. I'll just say leadership in case it's more than, because it shouldn't be a monarch sitting on top and saying this is a dictatorship, right? This should be,
mm,
communal. This should be a conversation. Probably, if 80% of the faction or more, 80, 85 is your recruits, maybe 10% is in that enforcer to officer role, but really only a very select few are probably in that leader co-leader space. But those are the ones who are
right,
deciding certain things like, hey, are we going to kick somebody because they have to have surgery, or are we going to let them slide? Are we going to
right.
be one who, we're just here to have fun, guys, so just do what you can. I don't care about if you get 10
Yeah,
war score or 10 million or 10,000 10 million, or whatever. That's the prerogative of leadership. And then the reverse, to kind of bring it back full circle, the last role of the recruit is to decide, is this the culture I want to be a part of? Right. So if your faction
mm,
is family first but doesn't really chase rewards, and
strong.
you're a top spender, and you're like, well, I'm not getting I'm not even getting a fraction of what I could if I was in a more aggressive faction. But on the flip side of
And
that,
some don't even know that. Side
right.
note, some
Oh
don't
yeah.
know that there
Right.
are better rewards out there. Some
Right.
are very content with where they are and what they're doing.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And then there's other factions that famously, like, and we've said it before on this podcast, this is not wrong. This is the culture they want to have. And so if you don't agree with that
Mm,
culture, you just don't belong in that faction. But some
yeah,
factions, like DJ's, he mentioned on his stream, some people were asking him about his faction, like, what are your requirements? It's not fair for me to even say what the requirements are, because what it is our requirements are, we do whatever it takes to stay in the top 10. So if that's your 0.5% one event and 1% the next, and then 200% the next event, we are going to do whatever it takes to stay in the top 10. So that might require
Wow,
spending. That might
that's really
require
good.
everybody on the entire faction gets 100 million war score. But if you want that, you just need to know that's the culture you're going into.
Everybody has to bring up Zombie Cena for this boss battle.
To
The
6
6-star
silver.
silver.
Oh, I'm out. I can't.
Have fun with
I
that,
don't have
DJ.
guitars.
Have fun with that one. Buh. We will
Yeah.
not be. We will not
Hey,
be.
we
No,
are number
sir.
7, so I
But you know
mean, we
what?
don't have them
I'll
yet.
say here's my gripe about Zombie Cena. Trickster tokens are so
Yeah.
rare already.
Oh yeah,
They're
they did that on
what,
purpose.
yeah, and I'm like, no way, bro. I'm just
Yeah.
now coming out of the pit of despair with tricksters.
The
I ain't
pulp
doing
of
that.
despair.
Now, if he was Hall of Fame and I had an
Oh
alternative
yeah,
currency, I would do
yeah,
it. I would
I would
probably
too.
do it, but I ain't
Yeah,
doing
I would too.
this.
I
No,
can't. I don't have
sir,
the guitars.
Scopely. I draw the
Yeah.
line at Zombie Cena 6-star. So you better.
Well,
And they didn't
I
even
got
sell
you.
the fuse. I thought they might sell that fuse. Like, I thought, I was like, oh, that's probably gonna be $30 later this week. Never happened.
Oh
Really
no,
interesting.
they're gonna sell 6 silver. He's gonna be $100. But anyway,
But a
yeah, no. So
Zombie
the last
Cena
piece, let me just make
barf.
sure people don't miss this though. The
Yeah.
last role of the recruit is to make sure that you match the culture of where you're going. If you want to be in a rewards-based faction and you are willing to spend and you are willing to hit more than 1%, then that's the right faction for you.
Right.
But if you are going to be cramped by somebody saying, hey, you need like to stay in this faction, you have to have 50 million war score, and you're like, oh, how dare you? Like, that might not be the right faction for you. And
Right.
that's okay. The faction isn't wrong. You're not wrong. The match is what's wrong. So you want to
Right.
make sure you've got a love connection, Chuck Woolery, and
You want to make sure
then
that
things
leader
go.
has the red wine of your dreams. Yeah. So Lee, let
Pause.
me thank you for sharing that. And is there any differential here between leader, co-leader? That's just one follow-up question. Is like, I see co-leaders, but
Right.
I see lots of co-leaders. I see very few leaders.
Right. That's intentional.
Okay. Is
Yeah.
there any, should
Yeah.
co-leaders aspire to be leaders of their own faction someday?
I mean,
Um,
again, that's the love connection is what that is. I
um,
mean, there should only be one, maybe two key leaders, but at some point somebody has to be the buck stops here person.
right.
And so that's why, like for example, in what I do, we have a team of 7 that are all equals, but I am chief among equals, and we all know that. Like if there is
You're the
a
tribal chief.
if there is I always work through our team and say, how do we feel about this? And usually we're pretty well in agreement. We have a
Yeah.
rule. We call it the 180 rule. If 100% of us are 80% sure, we move forward. That's our 180.
And
100% of us are
wow,
80% sure we move forward.
this is going
But
to be a leadership podcast by the end of this. We're going to be called Leadership Chat with Lee and
with
Rusty.
with Lee and Rusty. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. But if there is a situation where it's just like there's no clear decision to be made together, then my role as leader is to say, okay, right or wrong, this is where we're going, and we go together. Now, I want to make sure
Mm,
we go together, but we go together. And so similarly, your faction should have one, maybe in some cases two, but again, that's if those two disagree, then now you've split your faction, you split your opinions.
right.
But one person who isn't the dictator, isn't the everyone shut up and listen kind of person, not the tribal chief caricature, right, that Roman Reigns played, but kind of more the Cody Rhodes, like I'm the leader, but I want to get you
Cody
guys in on
Rhodes.
this. Let's talk. What do you want to
Well,
talk about?
yeah, and to relate it to Roman, right? In the story, he's supposed to have these village elders, right? And my biggest complaint about that story is that they have not been included in the story,
Yeah,
right? And maybe that's intentional, right? So you have this leader who's very autocratic versus democratic. And I
right.
think great faction leaders, they do consider the voice around them. They do listen to the
Hmm.
voices around them. And I would say the top factions in this game are not one-man shows.
Right.
I would again, a very infamous figure in this game would be
Mm,
Flextodon from Woken.
yeah.
There's no way he's a one-man show.
Right.
He for the long-term and sustainable success that they have had and
Right.
continue to have, he must have a group of very solid leaders around
Mm,
him,
yes.
officers, enforcers. Like I should ask him that because we message a little bit, but like I have to believe that the
Right.
leadership of the top factions are pretty healthy and doing a lot of
Right.
the things that we're saying here.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, including Woken Warriors 420, the number one faction consistently in the
Right.
game. So,
Yeah. By the way, I thought it was funny. We were above Woken in the event for a little bit,
why you
and
got to bring that up? Why you got
one
to
of
bring
our
that up?
people called
Oh
out
man. Oh
Woken,
man.
and within a day they had jumped 10
Don't
spots and took us out.
don't poke a sleeping bear, man. Remember,
Thought it
Roddy
was
Piper used to say
hilarious.
that. Don't
Yeah.
spit in the wind. Don't step on Superman's cape. Right? That was
Right.
like he would always say, like, do not
Don't try
poke
to
a sleep.
box with
Yeah,
God. Your
yeah,
arms are too short.
yeah. Roddy Piper. Um,
Yeah.
so Lee, let me ask you this: since we're talking about roles and factions and strategy, this comment came up this week on a message board I was reading. Someone
Okay.
asked the question, what is a good war score? Is it 10 million,
Oh,
20 million, 50 million? So that was the post, right? There were
yeah.
over 100, I think there were over 140 responses to that
Wow.
question, which tells me it's worth talking about and that
Yeah.
people are talking about it. You've used some language. I've developed a little bit of a matrix, but
Mm,
on a very broad and open-ended question, Lee,
right.
how does faction life, faction strategy play into your war score?
Wow. Well, I mean, I think it goes back to we've used the language of rewards-based faction or family-first faction. It goes to what kind of a faction you're in. On the previous faction we were in, it didn't matter if you, as long as you didn't post a zero, it didn't matter if you had a million war score or 100 million war score. That was kind of the, hey, everybody do what you can and enjoy what you get.
And
Whereas
yeah,
now we don't have a minimum war score, but I think you can attest that the average war score is pretty darn high. So it kind of
yeah.
depends on the culture you're in. But I'm curious to hear about this matrix that Neo has come up with.
Well, it's not the answer that we're looking for. It's the question that drives us, right? As
Ooh,
said by Trinity or by
not
Morpheus.
the
One of the
answer
two
we're
said
looking
it.
for.
Yeah. So
The question that
I
drives
think
us.
so if you do a matrix, right? A 4x4 grid. So you have casual and competitive, right? Casual and competitive. I like you in bullet time just now. So the bottom left of this matrix is going to be a casual player and a casual faction. Casual player and a casual faction. And what's a good war score for a casual player and a casual faction? I said, and feel free to refute any of this. I would
Yeah.
say a 20 million war score is
Mm,
good, but no
good.
one really cares.
Agreed.
And you're missing out on the rewards that come at 50 million.
Double agree. Yep.
Um, so why 20 million, Lee? And tell us what's the key about the 20 million mark?
Well, I would say 10 to 20 million because it has been as low as 10 before, but it's usually 20 million. That's where you get all the faction rewards is 20 million war score. And while we can, go back to our episode that we talked about with BDC, where he gave us all the faction tips on how to
Oh,
max
so
war
good.
score,
Yeah.
so good. But just for comparison, like there was one faction feud that happened oh, I'd say 2 months ago, 3 months ago, whatever it was, before they started the tweaking the system and all that, where I could literally only play the feud for less than 30 minutes. Like that was all I had to work. I had blah, blah, blah. I hopped in and in 30 minutes got 20 million war score. I mean, that was probably my proudest moment ever, but it was like I had the right partner and we just went boom, 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 done, boom, 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 done, boom, boom, boom,
Was I
done,
that
like four
partner?
times.
Just I don't remember. Was I that partner?
No, I was
Oh,
not.
okay.
That was
Okay.
not you. Sorry.
And did you
I
have
think it was
promoters?
Legend Hunter,
Did you have
and I was.
promoters?
Oh yeah, you have to. I mean, that's you got to have the 2 times speed. You got to have. I
Right.
mean, if you're talking about getting that kind of war score,
Right.
you
No, the
got to
reason I
have
ask is because
promoters.
someone out there just went, how? How could he
Yeah.
do that? How's
Oh
that
right.
possible? So I'm always going to
Yeah.
try to dial in on the how.
Right. So
Um,
I have every war score promoter except Undertaker, and I have all of them maxed at 50%. And then, again, just going back to that episode and BDC's tips and tricks, but functionally, what I've learned in Feud is speed. Speed is key.
yeah.
So while you need to get your CSS and all that good stuff, I'm going to say should, but I don't mean to should on people, if that makes sense. You should, if you're going for top war score, be finishing each feud, each little feud, within about 10 minutes. 10 to 12 minutes is a good, and that's fighting all 6-star silvers.
All right.
Now, of course, people are just going, oh my gosh, that's impossible.
Well, no, listen.
Again, the Matrix, that's not the Matrix you're in
Right.
if you're a casual faction,
Right.
casual player. So
And the question is, what is a good war score?
10
Right?
to 20 million for the
There's a lot of
casual.
nuance here, a lot of
Yeah.
nuance, a lot of
Right.
complexity.
Right.
Um, so a fair war score would be less. A
Yes.
decent war score is not a good war
Right.
score. We're answering what is a good war score,
Right.
not fair, decent, okay.
Right.
Those numbers are different. What Lee is
Yeah.
sharing is the good stuff, right? So now we have the bottom. We're going to move over a quadrant. A competitive player in a casual faction, which was you for a long time. You were, now I'm using the words
Yeah.
competitive and casual.
Right.
You use the terms family first or rewards first.
Right.
I would say they're synonymous, right?
Okay.
But a
Fair.
competitive player in a casual faction,
Equals
a
frustration.
yes, and a good war score for that player would be 50 million.
Agreed.
Because they realize how important the rewards are at 50 million. They've done their part for the faction hitting 20. They've pushed on to 50, and yet they're secretly thinking about joining a more competitive faction because others are not hitting the 20 million mark.
Right.
That would be my assessment of
Seen it happen.
that prototype of a player.
Yep. When you have a competitive player in a casual faction, which we saw in our previous faction a number of times, they're often frustrated and they're often frustrating. So they're frustrated because they're not getting all the rewards out of it, even though they are pushing the needle. And they're frustrating because they're in chat going, what the heck is wrong with you people? Like, I'm doing this. Why aren't you doing this? And so again, it's a cultural mismatch. That love connection, Chuck Woolery, has not happened, right? And so they're the problem and they are the solution in their mind. So it's just a mismatch. They're not bad, the faction's not bad. It's just a mismatch because we need family first factions, casual factions for people who just want to get to enjoy the game and not have to deal with the other things. But if you are in that and you are a mismatch, then I think it's time to find a new faction.
Yeah.
And I'll say the same when you get to this quadrant too, by the way.
Yeah, and we'll talk. Yes. So now we move up the ladder to a casual player in a competitive faction. That would be top left. Casual player in a competitive faction. They're going to get around the same 50 million war score.
Agreed.
But no one is impressed with it. And they're probably on some sort of watch list and even being considered to be kicked or demoted, meaning sent to a sister faction or a lower tier among their faction family. There might be on a watch list. Hey, if this person scores, don't If they're
Yeah.
not hitting higher in boss battle and
Right.
showdown, they're not grinding the kickoff with us.
Right.
Um, but that's crazy because that's the same number, 50
Yeah.
million.
Yep.
So we're saying, like, what's a good war score for a casual player in a competitive faction would be 50, but they're in danger and they
Yeah.
may not even know it. Lee, am I way off here by thinking that?
I think in most factions, if you hit 50, you'd be okay, but you're right. I think you might be bubble. You might be if everybody else is hitting above that and you're on that bottom, one of my as we've had people come into the faction, we don't have minimums with Toxic Mafia, but we again are top, we've become a top 10, a top 20 faction.
We were
And I
14 in the last feud. We were
There you go.
14th place
Okay,
in
so
the
top
last feud.
20, top
Yeah.
15. So I tell people, in my role as an officer, is they're like, hey, is this enough? I'm like, look, you kind of need to watch what everybody else is doing and where are
Right.
you at? Like
Are
if
you
you're
growing?
below
Yeah.
the 80,
Right.
if you're 81 through 100, you might want to start just picking it up because not saying we're dropping, we don't drop people frequently because we do grind real well. But if you're in that bottom 10%, especially, you better have some alarm bells going off to say, if I want to stay here, maybe 50 million isn't enough anymore. And that sounds crazy, but it's reality. And it
For
all comes
you,
back to the fit. You are
yeah.
not a fit if you are in that bottom, consistently in that bottom stretch.
Do you remember your war score for the last feud?
Yeah, I hit 100 million and had to stop. So it was
Okay.
right over 100 million.
And do
So
you remember where you placed among the 100 in our faction?
I do not, but I know
Okay.
you do.
Yes. Well, I just thought that comparison is helpful to share because in a top 20 faction, my war score was one of my better scores, right? And I think I had 62 million and I was in the bottom 25% of our
Mm,
faction. So there were
wow.
75 people ahead of me
Yeah.
at 62 million. And I felt great about
Yeah.
my 62 million because my roster is
It's
around 6
growing.
million. I think
It's
I
growing.
think your roster should be your war score should be about 10 times your talent level. I think that's a
Oh,
safe way to look
interesting.
at it. I think if you're at 6 million roster talent, you should be hitting consistently
Hmm,
you should be hitting 60 million war score. I think if you're
interesting.
at 10 million talent level, you should have no problem throwing in 100
Yeah.
mil in a war
Well,
score.
that's where I don't think it scales. Once you get past like 8 or 9, I mean, like
Right.
somebody who, because 10 is still among the top, like the top couple players in our faction are 10, 11 million on their
Yes.
overall roster talent. And one of them famously often hits 500 to 800 million war score.
Yes. Now it's
So
not going to be
goes,
it's not going to be commensurate, but what I'm saying is the
oh, sure.
baseline, the
Okay.
baseline.
That makes sense.
So if your roster talent level is 3 million, 30 million is going to be a stretch. It's going to be a grind. It's going to be a
Yeah,
tough,
that's fair.
it's going to be tough to hit that
Right.
20 mil faction mark
Unless
if you're
you
at yeah. Go ahead.
unless you lucked into Austin or DDP or someone that just is all of a sudden a game changer for you. But then you're
Right.
still,
But
you
you'd
just
need
have one trick.
promoters,
Yeah,
you'd need entourage,
that's
you'd
true.
need
That's true.
stairs. There's a
Yep,
lot of things. So
that
I
makes
think
sense.
as a rule of thumb, it's safe. It's a safe parameter to say, yeah, man, we can look at a guy. We're considering him for our faction. Talent levels around 7 million, but dude, he got 40 million in the last 3, 4 feuds.
That's fair.
What's up with that? Like he ought
That's
to be
fair.
hitting, 70 to 100 mil
Right.
on that level, you know.
That's fair.
Um, so then if we move over, so he said you might be on a watch list, or the thing that I left out of this is that you might be on a watch list to be kicked or demoted unless you contribute
Hmm.
in other ways,
Yeah.
right? So if you're contributing, don't worry, don't
Right.
stress. If you're out there listening right now, you're like, oh man, I only hit, 50 mil, under 50, 40 mil in the last feud. And is my faction going to boot me? No, No, you'll know it probably if you have good leadership. You'll know if you're
Right.
on a performance improvement plan, right? Before you get canned.
You call you Pip.
Yeah, but yeah, you're probably contributing in other ways, and those other ways are really important to you staying
Right.
in that faction. So the
Agreed.
final quadrant,
Oh, now we're here.
competitive player in a competitive faction.
Yep.
The question was, what is a good war score? What
100
is a
million.
good war score? And I wrote, I'm so glad you said that because I agree. I wrote 100 million max war score is the baseline,
Yep.
and you're pushing for stretch rewards. You're also trying to make the top 100 individual leaderboard, and you're consumed with trying to move your faction up the faction leaderboard. That is a good
Yeah.
war score as far as like, what are the top 10? What are the top 5? What are they doing in feud? What do they think is good? Is the herd mentality of, are we moving up the leaderboard
Right.
together and individually? And at
Right.
the minimum, everyone has maxed the feud at 100 million. Would you
Yep.
agree with that? Or you have more to add?
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. We're talking the top, you're talking the top 10 factions, you're talking the top whatever. And 100 maybe, maybe the bottom 10% only hits 90, or whatever. But yeah, you are talking probably in that 100 million war score if you really want to be in that top competitive faction
Yeah,
minimum.
I would say this. Me sharing today that my war score was 62 mil and that it was one
Yeah.
of my personal best, I will not be getting any recruiting messages from the top 10 factions. They will
Yeah.
not hear my score and go, oh, you know what we need in this faction? We need somebody to be number 100 out of 100. And let's let it be Rusty because he's such a nice guy, right?
Right.
They don't want that. They don't want me, and it's because I'm not in a place yet in the game where I would consider myself a competitive player. I am as competitive as I can be, but I also know my war score is not good by competitive comparison, right? So rather than me being sad or being miserable about what I scored, or pouting and all that stuff, I've come to terms with, I kind of am where I am and I like where I am, but I'm so thankful that I'm part of a competitive faction who's going to take us so much further than I can. And I'm going to focus on contributing. Like today, during this episode, I have not stopped running Zombie Priest boss battle level 20 levels. I have been
Yeah.
running them the entirety of this show,
Yeah.
and just chipping away at the faction contest, chipping while I'm doing other things. Lee, what would you say about somebody who's competitive player in a competitive faction,
Yeah.
and what does that feel like? What would you say for those that aspire to be that?
Yep. I mean, I think that war score is not the only thing for those who are freaking out and going, oh my gosh, if it's all on war score, I'm in trouble. It is one of the metrics. Boss battle is obviously going to be a metric, and kickoff event is going to be a metric for most top factions. So, you want to be competitive in those modes as well. But yeah, if you are, let's say you're in a competitive, or you're in most of the top factions, I would say top 50, most of the top 50 or above would have this mentality. So most everybody in those 50 to 100 and below would too, is if you are trying, maybe you can't hit, there's got to be a minimum threshold. Like maybe you're in a top faction, they say, okay, if you can hit 50, but you are killing it in boss battle, you're going great in your showdown events, you're doing all this, then you're probably not on the bubble. You're probably not in trouble. But you
Right.
said something that I think is key, and we talk about the culture piece. The leadership needs to let you know. There shouldn't be a question mark in your mind of, am I doing okay or am I not?
Mm,
And if you have a question, you should be able to reach out to your officers and maybe the leader and just saying, hey, am I doing okay in where we're at? And hopefully your officers or your leader would be honest enough with you to say, like, yeah, we love having you around. You do this, you do that. Like, don't worry. we got you, or like, yeah, actually, we really do need to see you step up. Otherwise, this might not be the right faction for you. Because I think that people get this misconception that if you get kicked from a faction, now obviously I'm talking in a perfect world where no feelings are involved and everybody's happy and friends, and that doesn't exist. But stay with me there for a moment. If the right reasons are used and you're going to be removed from your faction, I think if it's handled properly, you understand and you walk away going, dang, well, hopefully I can get there someday. Hopefully I can get back there. In a bad culture, it's boom, I woke up and I was kicked and I don't know why. Or, I got a message after the fact, like, your war score sucked, dude, you're gone. And you're like, oh, well,
Or
thanks,
even
man.
worse, no message, and you wake
Yes, I
up
said
and you're
no. Yeah.
kicked and you don't even
Yeah.
know.
You're like,
That's
what?
happened to me before.
What happened?
That's happened to me. It was terrible. I was so mad. And there was
I see
that
those
was
posts on Facebook.
oh, that was in the before Discord, to where like I don't know that they could have let me know, right? So
Yeah.
these is the early days of the game, you know.
Yeah.
Hey,
Well,
um, let me say this, Lee. This would actually be really good content to do this same parameter, casual, competitive, for other
mhm.
modes. Like what is
Yeah,
what is boss battle, showdown?
right.
So like we could talk about that as what is good, and
Yeah.
of course it's going to be a moving target with
Yeah.
contests as they are in flux. But for today, I think that's all we've got. Let's turn our
But for next
attention.
week, The Matrix returns, the return of Neo.
Let's turn our attention to the real world of professional wrestling as we talk about WWE TV and the road to payback, as well as everything happening leading up to what might be the biggest draft in the history of the modern era of wrestling. The
And maybe
draft
they
is
do it
coming
right.
up. They're advertising the draft like it's going to be a really, really big deal. And that's what it
Yeah,
used to be. The draft used to matter. It used to
right.
matter. People didn't, float show to show or get fakey. His contract allows him to be on whichever show and I was like, oh, come on,
I know
stupid
what's
Brock
going to happen.
Lesnar. I hate Brock Lesnar. And that's
Allegedly.
one of the reasons I just don't like him. I don't like Brock Lesnar. It's true. I don't like him.
Allegedly.
And I never have. I've never been a Lesnar guy.
Allegedly.
Lee, what's going on? We had a big return this week. I alluded it to in the
Ooh,
show open.
can we do
Of
the draft first though?
Oh, sure, of
Or we
course.
want to, okay, because here's my it's not a prediction, it's a spoiler. We know in 2025 Raw is moving to Netflix.
We know.
SmackDown is moving to USA. Raw will be the number one show by far. Cody Rhodes is getting drafted to Raw, period. That's it.
And,
That's all I got.
even though he has the title,
Oh, they'll just swap. They'll
well,
just
we
not
don't
like
know.
swap belts, but they'll just move him over because they're not
Okay.
color coordinated anymore.
Okay. Let me say this. First of all, the tag team belts have been redesigned and
So better.
renamed. They've been rebranded as
Yep.
the World Heavyweight Tag Team or World Tag Team
World Tag Team
Championships.
Champions, and the
I
other will
don't
be
think
the
heavyweights.
WWE one this Friday.
Well, we don't know. I was going to say
It'll
this.
happen.
We don't know what Cody's belt will be called. We anticipate there being a rebrand of
They've already done it.
Roman's unit. What? It's not
They've
leaked
already
out.
done it. It
No,
is. It's public. It's on their website. They officially changed it from the undisputed WWE Universal Championship to undisputed WWE Championship. They made that shift on their website. Cody's been referring to it that way now publicly. Like they have very subtly but very careful or quickly, Universal's no longer a part of the branding. It's done. The only thing that
interesting.
needs to change is the belt design. And I still think they should have done it night one, but I still think they're bringing back the winged eagle. But yes, they're no longer, these are the blue belts and these are the red belts. So now they don't have to do a stupid like, here you can have the blue belt. Thanks for the red belt. See you later. They don't
Tell
have
me
to
the
do that
name.
anymore.
Tell me the name of the title again of Cody's title.
Undisputed WWE Heavyweight Championship.
So
or
so
World
then
Heavyweight Championship. Yeah.
so,
They
so
just
then
dropped
the
Universal.
so then the tag belts would, by comparison, also be called what? The undisputed tag team champion?
No, because Undisputed is a moniker they've used when they've combined the belts, and they're not combined. Undisputed, like Chris Jericho,
Okay.
famously won the Undisputed Championship when he beat Steve Austin and The Rock in the same night and unified the belts, and then that's when we
Okay.
got the first Undisputed Championship. So
I,
basically, the Roman
so
belts got combined with the Raw belts and became one, and now they're just pulling a magic trick. And functionally, it is back to just being the WWE title.
okay, that's what I was asking. If we're not using the word universal and we're
Yeah,
not
that
using the word
lineage is gone.
undisputed, so they'll just be called the WWE Tag Team Champions.
Yeah, I think. I mean, whatever they've referred to him on the belts. Didn't wasn't it W World Tag Team? I think it's World Tag Team Champions.
But that's what the Raw belts are called.
Well, the Friday again, SmackDown. They're gonna. I don't know. We'll see. We'll
See,
see.
that's where
Because
that's where it's so confusing to me, is because obviously we're in the middle of a major rebrand and a new era.
right,
We don't quite know what it's called. It's not
back
going to be
era.
called the Triple H era.
I don't
Um,
know.
in the same way that the Attitude Era was not
Right,
called that as it emerged,
right.
right?
It
But
was
they would
later.
say we have a new attitude. Okay,
Right.
yes. So we didn't know.
Yeah.
Often,
Makes
as
sense.
as history is writing itself now, we don't know
Yeah.
what it will hold. Much like we don't know what these, I guess, what these titles will be called or
It's
what they
true.
will look like until this Friday. Lee, as we talk
That's
about the
true.
draft, we have to consider that Rhea Ripley laid her title down on the ground
So
on Monday
sad.
Night Raw
So
and
sad.
walked away from the belt.
Mm,
She has a real injury um, that was exacerbated by the Liv Morgan revenge tour.
mm.
Allegedly, this injury was in place pre-Mania and she
Yep.
powered through it, which makes me wonder, why did she not just drop the belt to Becky at Mania? Why go
Well,
through the pomp and circumstance of all of this? Furthermore, will this title be for contention at Queen of the Ring in Jeddah in a few months?
that would be smart, but they've already announced that they're gonna crown a a female world champion next Monday. So it's like,
Why
well, don't
before the
rush that.
draft?
Don't rush
Why do
that.
that before the draft?
Right.
Why do that before Queen of the Ring?
Yeah. I think it would be really cool for the draft if it was still vacant and they drafted the belt, the position of champion to one of the shows, but the slot that person that fills it was empty. That would have been really cool. Like, oh, we have drafted Bailey. Okay, well, we've drafted the women's world championship belt, and whoever gets it comes over to or whatever. It creates stakes, and so yeah, with Paul Levesque era booking, I would expect them to do something bigger than what it sounds like they're doing, which is just next Monday on Raw they're going to make a champion happen. But who knows? Who knows? And I am 100%. I didn't know that Rhea was injured before Mania,
Me
but
either.
in our predictions, I called out. I think Becky should have won it, and then Tiffy Time should have come and
Oh,
started a feud with Becky, and that
what
would have
a
been your world
dream. What a
championship
dream
title.
that would have
So,
been. Tiffany
but
Stratton is the best thing in the women's division right now,
ooh, even over
as
Jade
is.
Cargill.
Yes. Jade
Wow.
is not, she does not carry the okay, Jade has this level of ring rust, is kind of the term,
Hmm.
as far as, like, I would say LA Knight has it the same thing,
Hmm.
right? If the opposite of ring rust were Shawn Michaels in his prime, or
Okay.
AJ Styles in his prime,
Okay.
or Owen Hart in his prime, right? A guy that will make you look like you are having a 5-star match, even if you are not
Right.
good. They will
Like Logan
compensate.
Paul drinking Prime.
Right, right. Well, here's the thing, right? All of the best wrestlers have always been able to put other people over at their own expense.
Yep.
You know who can't do that? Naomi.
Hmm.
Naomi came back and looks like she has lost a step
Hmm.
in the ring with today's talent and speed. And I would even say perfectionism as a quality of the new women's division. We're so beyond the jump splits and the booty bump and the gimmick and the shtick that was the Divas era.
Hmm.
It ain't cutting the mustard anymore. And I feel
Hmm.
like Jade is on the cusp of greatness, but has got to polish up
Yeah.
and have a match that's longer than 30 seconds to prove that she is polished.
Yep. I agree. They're doing good by giving her the Goldberg spot right now. Just let her come out, dominate. But I think she'll grow into that. But what you bring up is very interesting because for the first time, Papa H is overseeing the entire draft. And guess what is not the can I say bastard stepchild anymore? NXT. So
Right.
NXT is a part of the draft, and the rumor, or maybe even outright statement, is that main roster, quote unquote, superstars are not being moved down because it's no longer a demotion, but they will be moved over to
Yeah.
NXT.
I think
And
Jade
one of
needs an
those names is
NXT run.
Natalia.
Jade needs
You
an
know,
NXT run for
oh, I was
sure.
thinking Naomi, but either way.
Both. But like, I would love to see Jade have an Asuka-esque NXT run.
Hmm,
I think Jade could be the girl to break Asuka's streak as far as
interesting.
longest women's reign. Give her some
Hmm.
credibility and some reps and some mileage on those tires, because you're right. She's Goldberg at this point. A
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful Goldberg.
Wow.
She is
Wow.
gorgeous, gorgeous Goldberg, but
Saying
Goldberg
Bill wasn't
nonetheless.
gorgeous.
But you know who's not gorgeous and has a ton of ring rust? I would
Uh-oh.
argue your boy Sheamus that came back this
Uh-oh.
Monday night. Tell us about your
Uh-oh.
thoughts on Sheamus.
Well, man, I saw Sheamus and immediately thought, ooh, I identify with that man. I got the red hair, I got the dad gut going on. But I think it's interesting. People are calling him,
Sheamus should not have the dad gut. I mean, he's a
he's earned
four-time former WWE champion, you know?
it. Well, I
A
mean, he went
dad gut
through
like
a massive
Sheamus.
physical ordeal. But I think it's funny is the commentary is that on one group they're calling him Fat Sheamus, and the
Oh,
other side they're calling out Fat Shaming. Fat
oh,
Sheamus versus Fat Shaming. Like him
agreed.
coming back and people going like, "Hey, you're beautiful no matter what your body size is." I
Right.
think on the other side, you've got people who are like, "Oh my gosh, this guy is, to quote one of our other friends, is he a turd? Is he a turd?" But what I noticed in terms of, we talk about who cares what size he is, but what the ring rust aspect of it,
Yeah.
in him coming back, when he went to do the white noise on Ivar. Now, of course, again, we're not
It's
being
friggin'
sizist,
Ivar,
but
first of
Ivar's a
all.
big dude. I mean, that takes a feat of strength. And like he went up to the ropes and it looked like he was at gassed. It looked like he was out of breath. He was just like,
Dude, bro.
and then he
I
got
don't
up there and just bam.
that was as impressive as when Hogan slammed Andre to me. That was
Yeah.
to do anything to Ivar off the top rope is A plus. Um, that is a 5-star move. Maybe not be a 5-star match, but that's a 5-star move. If you
Right.
go up top with Ivar and do anything, it's going to be really, really good. Um,
Right.
Lee, let me ask you this: are the Viking Raiders done?
No,
And,
they're
and
moving to
and here
NXT.
and here's why I'm asking, for two reasons. Number one, Ivar has been on a solo run minus his partner, and it's gone really well.
Yeah.
Number two, Ivar showed up in street clothes like a biker on
Hmm.
NXT and challenged the reigning North American champion to a
Interesting.
match. So not only is he getting a push, now he's getting a solo title shot in NXT, the North American
Right.
title. Um, and he showed up looking like he rode his Harley there with no war paint, with
Yeah.
no Valhalla. Were the
Hmm.
Viking Raiders a failed experiment of a previous era? And now they're
Ooh.
beginning to unwind the clock a little bit on him?
Well, here's some things. So now that we are more free in the Paul Levesque era, the commentators are more free. If you noticed on Monday when Ivar came out, they referred to when the Viking Raiders got called up, and they said, and he was called up to Raw in blah, 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 when they were
Yeah.
called the Viking Experience. Like
Oh,
they
that was
called it out.
so terrible.
They didn't ignore it. They just said, like, this was
Yeah.
stupid. And look,
Yeah, it
we're going to
was.
acknowledge it and move past it. So there was healing. There was healing in those wounds, right? But yeah, the Viking Raiders are moving to NXT. Eric, we don't know the extent of his injury, but Eric's real life wife is Valhalla. So it makes sense that,
Really?
they're, yeah,
What if
yeah,
Eric retains the Viking moniker with Valhalla and
right.
Ivar goes street biker,
That could be.
Crush?
Maybe he's ABA Ivar,
I was thinking
the,
the new Crush. Remember when Crush was
oh,
in
Crush.
Nation of Domination as like the biker?
I liked when
Oh
he was
my
in Chronic, but
gosh.
yeah,
Oh my
anyway.
gosh, dude.
Yeah. Well, I think it opens up some interesting storylines. I mean, we've got things building. Like, I think the Raw after Mania was a little disappointing to me. I mean, you had a couple NXT people up, but other than that, there wasn't a Matt Cardona, there wasn't whatever that showed up. But now looking back with hindsight, what Triple H is doing is he's validating
Yes,
NXT in people's eyes
you're
so that
right.
when Natalia moves over, it's not like, oh, you got demoted. It's like, no, we need a workhorse over here that can put over young talent.
It was
And
interesting to see an anticlimactic um Raw after Mania.
yeah,
At least I thought there have been more exciting call ups, and I guess we can't use the term call up on
right.
SmackDown recently with
Yeah,
Braun Breaker signing a
true.
contract, with
Yeah,
Jade Cargill signing a contract.
yeah,
Do these contracts matter after the draft? At the draft, are all contracts going to be voided?
right. I don't know. We'll see.
I need you to know the
See.
answers that I'm asking
Sorry. I'm
my
sorry.
questions.
Sorry.
Lee,
We will
what
know soon.
do you hope, like I hope, that Chelsea Green and Piper Nevin get drafted to opposite brands so that Chelsea can finally be a solo superstar in the same vein as Carmella, and then
Oh,
maybe Carmella returns and Carmella and
oh.
Chelsea become the greatest heel tag team of all time? Wouldn't that be phenomenal?
Uh, yeah, I mean, at least they've leaned into the random pairing and they've kind of given Piper a personality lately. Because before her personality is, I'm upset that I'm here. At least with the Chelsea partnering. Now she's like, oh, she's kind of becoming Chelsea, and all
It's
that.
so
But
weird, and she still got on the I
the
think
Scottish
Piper and
bro.
Natalia would be a great tag team.
Oh,
A great
interesting.
tag team. Like, let
Interesting.
them go on a title run together. That would be fun.
Yeah,
That would be
yeah.
dominant, right? Natalia
Well,
doesn't really fit
maybe.
anywhere, I don't think. And I don't
I
think
mean,
she
she's the
has.
longest serving woman in the company, but I mean, that's kind of her role. She's now elder statesman and she's still acting like she's, the hotness that's been, that's new hotness kind of thing.
Super weird.
So,
Natalia is
who
super
knows?
weird to me. She's an enigma to me because to me, Natalia and Naomi represent the mid card of the previous era of women's wrestling that
Right.
has been passed up at this point.
Yeah.
with
Well,
talent.
I mean, they did that for years. Like when, I mean, not that Roddy Piper was mid card, but I mean, he was at points. But like, when Roddy Piper came back, or when they did, and they'd be involved in mid card feuds and stuff. Bob Backlund. I mean, even those are actually old top tier guys. Even though Bob Backlund is weird, his wrestling character is
You
weird.
are
I just
obsessed with pale redheaded wrestlers like Sheamus and Bob Backlund. That is, I think that's like it's representation for the gingers, you know.
Somebody here's got salt and ketchup hair, and it isn't you. Just
You
saying.
got that spicy cayenne. You got the Cajun pepper.
Cajun pepper, spicy pepper.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway. Yeah, I'm excited about the draft. I think that things are going to move well. I think that 100% Cody, CM Punk, and Drew McIntyre are going to be Raw because those are your draws. And I
Cody.
think Damian
Okay.
Priest will be moved over to SmackDown. I think Jey Uso will be moved over to SmackDown because they did a thing where they established him as like Cody coming out to say like you're the guy on Raw. I've got to
Right.
go back to
Right.
SmackDown. They're gonna flip it. I
You
mean,
don't need me anymore.
main event is gonna be over on SmackDown
I
for
don't think he's a
sure.
main eventer.
Yeah,
So we've got problems there. I don't think he's a main eventer. I don't think he can carry the main event card,
yeah,
especially now that Jimmy's been jumped. This
yeah,
might be poised for an USO reunion. Maybe
yeah.
they're going to be maybe the good bloodline versus the bad bloodline, and we've got this all-out Samoan
Mm,
war for the tribe.
that'd be
That
cool.
might be interesting. The only problem I have with that is oftentimes, and one of the dark histories of WWE wrestling is they don't quite know what to do with minority wrestlers. And so they have them feud amongst
Yeah,
themselves.
like the
They,
LWO.
yeah, it's like, hey, what do we do with these incredible Latino high flyers?
Right,
Let's put them against other incredible
right,
Latino high flyers, right?
right.
Ahmed Johnson. Who's he gonna? Oh, Farouk, right? He's
Yeah,
got to be. It's like, wait a second. Can we ever have like? Can we ever just have like it be normal for there to
right.
be in inter now I'm saying interracial wrestling versus interracial wrestling where it
Yeah,
has to be samey,
yeah.
I just, to me, that's always been odd. That's always been an odd, um like I love Bobby Lashley's group, and it was one of the first, I don't know, like maybe semblances of this what I was hoping was going to be a really fun and powerful like heel faction, that was different and fresh and current. And then I just feel like they don't quite know what to do with them, and they don't quite
Yeah,
know who to pin them against. And then
agreed.
like, and there's like, are they gonna? And then I started thinking, oh, they're probably gonna bring back Omos, or they're probably gonna, or whatever, right? Like
Right.
it's always a strange. And I know and the reason I feel really comfortable talking about this topic is because we've talked about it in great lengths with our friend Iron Sheik 84, who's seen the
Yeah.
same thing his whole life, and being, very,
Of Arab descent
yeah, as I
and
say, racially and ethnically different than us.
right.
His ancestry is constantly cast as a trope of foreign heel,
Yeah.
right? Foreign Middle Eastern heel, and like, what
Right.
what do we do with these guys? And so yeah, there's a complexity to it all, and not that we know, on any level the solution, other than, let's mix it up. Let's just keep things, let's allow the diversity to breathe and to grow and to feel
Yeah.
organic and to feel fun, and stables don't always need to be the same, ethnicity and background, and they don't need to only feud against the same ethnicity and background, and we're okay with this, as a maybe an acceptance of modern times and
Yeah.
cultural progress, right? Not to get preachy, Lee. Does that feel okay? Does that feel, just
Yeah.
like kind of where we are as wrestling fans?
Yeah. I mean, I think in particular watching WrestleMania and seeing Dom just casually into the LWO storyline and then right back to the Judgment Day. I was like, why aren't they doing LWO versus Judgment Day? Like,
Yes.
that would have been great. Or Bobby, well, of course, then it becomes like almost race wars, and that's scary too. But you got the LWO, you got the Judgment Day, you got Bobby Lashley's group, the Hurt Business 2.0. Like, we
Right.
have this warfare going on between them. That would be really compelling and interesting. Now, it would be better if the racial diversity was mixed into there, but I mean, it makes
Sure.
sense. Like, this is the Latino heritage, this is, we are standing up, I mean, that makes sense. The pride, it's this is our African American heritage. So I mean, they are incorporating racial elements already, but
Right.
yeah,
And
why does
I
it have
don't
to
think
be
I
LWO Civil War
right.
constantly?
I don't think the perception would be race wars, so to
Right,
speak. Like
I
I
hope
think the
not.
perception would be normalcy. I think the perception would be like, oh, um, it totally makes sense that if a top faction is the bloodline, then they would inevitably have a run-in with other factions that were equally dominant and
Yeah,
powerful and intimidating, like the
you
Judgment
hope.
Day. When
Right.
why why can we not get a bloodline versus Judgment Day? Now, Judgment Day,
Yeah.
to their credit, might be the only faction with racial diversity and international diversity. When we have Finn from Ireland, right?
Ireland.
And we have Rhea from Australia, and we have Dominic from his or
USA,
heritage
but heritage is
and
Latino.
yeah and that's where it's just really interesting.
And then
And
Damian
Damien
Priest is
Puerto
the
Rico,
first Puerto Rican
yeah,
world champion
yeah.
since Pedro Morales.
Judgment Day is probably my favorite faction at this point, and I'm
Yeah.
and I'm and I'm worried that the Rhea's injury in the draft is going to bust them up. I think this is
Yeah.
the end of the Judgment Day, and I think they finally
Hmm.
became likable, credible, fun, fun to follow, interesting faction. And now that they've kind of made it, now it's time to bust them up, which is really
Right.
sad. But what can we
Well,
learn from the Judgment Day League? Can we learn that an internationally diverse and racially eclectic group can actually coexist and get over and be
yeah.
title and have title reigns and feud with anyone and it not be
Right.
a racial deal, right?
Yeah. Well,
So,
and you missed JD McDonough, dunna, 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 dunna,
well,
dunna.
I
But he's got to be what, Scottish? Because
I don't
McDonough,
know. I have no
McDonough.
idea. I don't know.
So you got
He's
there, and then you missed the most important member
don't even
of
say our
the
truth.
Judgment Day,
Don't
our
even say
truth,
it. He's
the
in the Judgment
best
Day.
member of
He's not
Judgment
in the
Day
Judgment
ever.
Day. He's
He
not in
is.
the Judgment
He
Day.
held the
Truth.
World Tag Team
Oh my
Championships
gosh.
alongside. He said, "I brought him back
That
to
was
the
so
Judgment
good.
Day."
That was such
He
a
is my favorite thing on
perfect
TV.
moment. That was a perfect moment when he
It
slipped
was.
in the
It was just.
title amongst the other titles and he's not supposed to be there. That was brilliant. Well, Lee, I think
uh,
that's all the time we have for this segment of WWE TV. And that also is all the time we have for this episode of Champions Chat today as we go on to our real lives and the work we have to do. We'll try to push this episode out and get it to you as quickly as possible. One disclaimer for those of you who listen to the audio version of this podcast, we are completely up to date on all back episodes. If you didn't know we had an audio version, you can look on anywhere you like podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify. Just search for WWE Champions Chat podcast, and you will find us. That's all for me, Lee. Take us out with any final burning sensations you have.
Pause.
Remember, don't make it inappropriate in the Discord, okay?
Oh, salt and ketchup, redhead. Anyway, so yeah, well, I was gonna say it's an honor to be a part of the community. We did it, we talked about that. Now I'll just say, hey, make sure you check us out on Friday nights on the official WWE Champions Twitch channel, where we are gonna power rate whoever is this weekend's character. I'm guessing a showboat version of Karrion Kross. What about you? Join us on Friday.
As
Join
a
the
zombie?
conversation.
As a zombie?
No, they're not doing zombie. They don't do zombies during spring outbreak. I mean, they
What?
do gear. They do
No
gear,
new
not new.
zombies? Are
No
you
new
kidding
zombie this
me? This
weekend.
is the worst week ever.
And end episode.
Let me hit stop. How do I hit stop? I never know.